Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and hello, Ding Black. Good to see you on tonight. All right, it is Sunday, and we are so close to the election. Y'all, this is the Hillbilly Think Tank, and I'm coming at you live from Tunnel Hills in Hardin County, Kentucky. And I am the educated hillbilly. No, that's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated folks here in Kentucky ever since my kith and kin came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone. I am one of the Cumberland Gap originals. So, y'all, in order to keep life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for our nation, we've got to make sure that our votes cannot be bought by corporations. And yet they currently are being bought by corporations, by folks like Musk and his Tesla, by Palantir and Peter Thiel. We have got to push back. So let's talk tonight about what this means. When Citizens United was the ruling that the Supreme Court gave a decade and a half ago, they made it possible for corporations to pump all the money, the dark money that they want, into political campaigns to buy off politicians. And it's completely legal. Nobody is doing anything anymore to stop this. It was Senator McCain and Senator Feingold that came up with a law that would prevent dark money and ads into being something that inundated us, up to 30 days before an election. After that 30-day mark, they couldn't come out and spread lies about each other in ads. And they had to reveal how much money they were spending, corporations were spending, other PACs were spending. So this all came crashing down when the Supreme Court made its ruling for Citizens United, stating that corporations are people too. And, I've never had a sip of bourbon with a corporation, but here's one to you, the non-corporate folks. We have got to turn this around if we're going to wrest back power from the robber barons. And we're again in the same situation we were in when the robber barons were completely ruling who would be on political parties' tickets. So let's look right now at what unfettered access to politicians is giving us and the type of grift that we're experiencing as our folks that want to be elected or that already are elected and want to hold on to their seat. Let's look at what it is giving us. What are they getting out of it? Well, number one, they don't have to think about us when they make their decisions. They can think just about their special interests. And we know that Diaper Don said this quiet part out loud. And then he doubled down on it when he was asked about it. So after making the statement that he did not think about the financial situation of Americans, when he's making negotiations overseas over making a deal with Iran about opening the Strait of Hormuz, he said, not even a little bit does he think about our financial situation when he's making a deal there. And then he just doubled down here in this interview after that statement. Well, they wanted to see, if he actually meant what he said. And this is, again, he got a chance to have a do-over on Fox. And nope, he used his little interview on Fox to do it again and to double down. So, Brett Bauer played Trump the clip where he was asked whether Americans' financial situations motivated him to make a deal with Iran and open the Strait of Hormuz. Trump's answer was blunt, not even a little bit. He added that he does not think about Americans' financial situation when making that call. Baer offered the escape hatch. Trump did not take it. He called the line a perfect statement and said, I'd make it again. Now, say it plainly. When a president is weighing war, oil routes, gas prices, and household pain, the answer cannot be, I don't think about anybody. That is governing as if, us ordinary citizens and our pain isn't anything but white noise that helps him sleep at night. So, this right here is what we've got to think about as we head to the polls. I already voted in the primaries, but if you haven't, I plead with you to vote in the primaries. Now, I'm not being primaried in the election that I'm running for, so I will be on the ballot for District 3 magistrate here in Hardin County in November. But we need to seriously consider every single ballot possibility that we have. We need to consider every person that's on that primary ballot. Are they going to be a shill for corporate interests as Diaper Don is? Or are they going to stand up for regular American people? And are they going to think about our pain and our suffering when they go and negotiate regulations, laws, and all the other negotiations that they're involved in as governing officials? If we know that someone is a trust fund baby that doesn't care about us, we should not be putting them on the ballot. That's what we've got to consider. Well, let's look back a little bit. During the last term of this current president, when he was number 45, we had a chance to consider, regulating dark money. And what did we decide to do? Supreme Court was having to decide whether it would overturn Citizens United or not. Well, first, here's what happened back then, if you don't remember. It's only about 9 years ago now.
Of our election system, but that is now dead in the Senate, and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not going to take that up.
So tell us more about H.R. 1. What are the provisions within that law which would maybe have some of the reforms desired by these people?
So it focuses a ton on transparency. So basically, companies, how much they have to, solicit versus how much they do now, and give the American people like a true outline of how much they're really engaged in the political system.
Now, let's think about that. If they had been regulated, this has succeeded these years ago, they would have to be responsible and transparent and let us know exactly how much they give each political candidate, each political party. You would know which brand it is that is bringing you a bill that goes before Congress. It might as well just be as if a politician is a NASCAR car and you have all these sponsors plastered over that politician. as they go by us. If we actually had clear and transparent regulations regulating politicians, that's what we would have. But we don't have that. They made sure that we couldn't get that.
Right now, you see a lot of top line numbers. There's super PACs, there's PACs, there's different mechanisms that are going into elections. And then, of course, the fact that trade associations can give as well as companies. So that's basically a big company can give from their PAC and then give a trade association money, and then a trade association's giving from their PAC as well. So there's all of these lines going into giving to campaigns. And so it would overhaul that to make it so that the American public would, I think, understand a little bit better where the money is coming from, and also curtail some of that spending.
And so do we expect any actual movement on this, or is it just the 10-year anniversary?
Right now, just the 10-year anniversary. I think they're using it as a way to bring attention to the issue, but I think that maybe after 2020, we'll see what they can actually do with it.
Yeah.
So we know they actually did jack squat with it. That just ended up being a 10-year anniversary. And here we are 6 years later after this report, and nothing has happened to turn around Citizens United. So until I can have a drink with the corporation, and sit down and have a drink with them and discuss, their child's last birthday and my child's last birthday, Citizens United is an absolute farce. And worse than a farce, it is corrupting our government and our government officials. And it's allowing the wars like we have right now going on to go on unfettered. And we cannot abide this in democracy. If we want a democracy and a republic, we must turn the tide on this. We must put people on our ballots in November that will actually fight this. But unless you actually do some true research and don't just vote on personality on the 19th, or if you've already voted like me, this primary election is key. It's crucial because this midterm is going to mean either the beginning of a new era in our democracy and a republic, or it's going to mean we're going to crumble and not have a democracy and a republic anymore. We'll only have an oligarchy and a republic. And we've got to change this tide. So let's go back, do a quick analysis on what it means, how we got here. What is this Citizens United ruling? What did it mean?
The government had asserted that it would have the right, for example, to limit the publication of a book that included one line of advocacy urging people to vote for a candidate at the very end of a long 500-page book. They had suggested that they could prohibit a union from publishing a pamphlet that advocated the election of a candidate. You could envision, a candidate something like, why working Americans should support, Hillary Clinton for president or something like that. They had suggested that books over Kindle could be banned under existing law. And so the Supreme Court days of a general election or within 30 days of a primary election.
Opinion programs, call-in programs, not just on the
by saying, okay, a corporation can't or a union can't even mention a candidate in a broadcast ad within 60 days of a general election or within 30 days of a primary election.
So right now we're being so inundated with corporate ads, especially for this Massey campaign where they're trying to get rid of Massey. President is just determined that Massey will not be on the Republican ticket, that Galrine will be his guy. We know Galrine is being paid for by Musk and by other billionaires because they don't want a man of principle like Massey. Even though I don't agree with 91% of the way he votes, I do know that he voted against the Epstein class and he voted for those files to be released. He voted against the big, ugly bill, knowing that it was going to put us so much further in debt. And if you haven't heard, we just passed the mark to where our debt exceeds our gross domestic product. Yes, our GDP is now surpassed by our debt. And this is all because of policies that Diaper Don has put into effect along with his lackeys in Congress. And Massey has refused to be one of those lackeys.
So enter a group called Citizens United.
Citizens United is an ideological group that is doing political activity, still around. And they had made a documentary called Hillary the Movie. This was coming out at the time, not of the past election that we just had, but back in 2008, in that period when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were going to be competing for the nomination, for the Democratic nomination to be president in the 2008 period. And Citizens United is a nonprofit corporation. That is, they're not selling shoes. They're just using the corporate form to be able to engage in associational activity. And there had already been a rule well before the Supreme Court had established, which said if you're an ideological corporation and you don't take money from for-profit companies, you can already spend whatever money you have in your treasury on political ads. And
so that ruling right there allowed all this dark money to come in to the war chests of all the political candidates in the United States of America. So any corporation could join with other corporations and start this nonprofit corporation that didn't make shoes, didn't make diddly squat, as he's saying. And they could join together, dump millions and billions of dollars into this corporation who could make donations and political ads and propaganda movies for a political candidate. That's what they're talking about.
Political activity. But Citizens United deliberately took money from for-profit corporations, and they did it because they were trying to set up a test case. What they wanted to do was to take this documentary they had made, Hillary the Movie, which said very negative things about Hillary Clinton, and they wanted to pay Comcast Cable $1 million to make this movie available as a video on demand, which anyone could watch by choosing it from the guide, their cable guide, and they'd be able to watch it. And under the federal statute, the Federal Election Commission said, this looks like it's going to be on television, broadcast in the period close to the election, and it's going to feature the name Hillary Clinton, who's a candidate for president. That would make it an election ad, cannot be paid for by corporate funds. There were lots of ways that this.
So we can think, obviously corporations are willing to do anything in order to wrest power from our democratic ideals. They don't want the average citizen to think for themselves. They want to do the thinking for them. Of course, now we're all given over to this due to constantly looking at our algorithm machine, which pushes us information that the corporations want. So we're in an even worse situation than we were when the Citizens United decision was made.
Supreme Court could have gone aside from overturning earlier cases, but the court was bold here. And on a 5-4 vote, the liberals on the court against the conservatives won. And the longstanding federal prohibition on corporations and labor unions as well, spending money in federal elections, fell.
So just as a kind of a lay citizen, on the face of it, I understand why there's all of this congressional legislation. You're afraid of undue influence from corporations. But, we were able to talk to a few experts who I think took a more sympathetic view to the Supreme Court.
So this is why we're in the situation we're in right now. We look at one of the PACs that gets the most flack and the most scrutiny, and that is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And it is the one who donates to both sides of the aisle, especially now to the Republican Party, but it also gives a lot of money to the Democratic Party. And Thomas Massie just put forth a bill that would have AIPAC registered as a foreign interest group. And anyone who receives money from them would have to announce that they are acting on the behalf of foreign interests. So this actually could be a game changer, but this is also going to bring far more AIPAC money, far more Musk money, far more dark money against Massie. So I'm sure we can expect that, we've already seen the ads ramped up today. The next 2 days are going to be even crazier when it comes to them pushing out more ads to try to get rid of Massie. And again, like I said, I'm no supporter of Massie, but I do support the fact that he has principles that he is not willing to bend for, even if he could get a whole lot of PAC money. So, all right, let's take a little break, watch some puppies, and we'll come back and look at some more examples of how we got where we are and what we're now seeing coming from all of this PAC money, and ask ourselves, how can we get out from underneath this monster? Because that's the thing I think most of us are worried about. We see what's going on. Well, how can we do something about it? All right. So a couple times now, I've highlighted another small state with some really important races going on. We know right here in Kentucky, an extremely important race, of course. All these races are important, but who's going to be the person to replace the biggest receptor of PAC money, which, of course, is Moscow Mitch? Who's going to replace him? That's a huge deal here. And another huge deal is going on in Maine, where we got Susan Collins, one of the biggest facilitators of Diaper Don. Is she going to be replaced by someone that actually wants to radically change our system so that it's not rigged against regular folks like us? We know that Graham Plattner is there, and he is promising to be that person that will bring about radical change on behalf of regular citizens. Well, he's up against a whole lot of corporate money, and that is going to be hard to overcome. So Susan Collins has reported raising $603,105 just this cycle alone from AIPAC. She raised $343,711 from folks in Maine. So AIPAC alone has given her nearly double what the folks of Maine have given her in individual contributions. AIPAC's not the only PAC that's given her money. So she's getting far more money from folks that aren't from Maine than she is getting from folks from Maine. And as he says, that explains a lot. If you go and look at who is running against all the other candidates in this state that aren't taking money from AIPAC, you're gonna have also an eye-opening experience. Number one, we know that Thomas Massie has refused AIPAC money. That's why he is at a vulnerable position right now, because he can't run the ads that Musk can run and that AIPAC can run for Eddie Gaurine. We also know, as I've reported before, that our Kentucky Democrats that are running to try to replace Guthrie, they're not getting any APAC money like Guthrie is. And so they're not able to get on to KET, as I talked about the other night. Well, in addition to this, we've got the ever running grift of Diaper Don. And we know that he has his hands, pockets, teeth, mouth always open for any grift that can come his way. So right now, here's his taxpayer grifts, in addition to his grifts from corporations. $10 billion in damages he is demanding from the IRS. $1 billion he's demanding for ballroom security. We know that the senators of the Guardians of the Pedophiles have guaranteed that they will try to get $1 billion for the ballroom security. What? This is, of course, after it was reported that supposedly and assuredly 400 million have been given by Pallinger, that's, Thiel, Bezos, Tim Cook, many others that donated to that East Wing. We also know that he's grifted $1 billion for Qatar jet refurbishments. Remember that jet that Qatar donated to us? And then now Qatar has their own military base here in the United States. Well, he's grifting $1 billion for refurbishments for that jet, remodeling of that jet. Remember, he plans on keeping that jet when he retires. He plans on it not being Air Force One for anybody else after him. He's already stated that. He is also looking for $230 million in Department of Justice compensation. This is supposed to come from taxpayers. All of this here is coming from taxpayers. That's his grift. And we've paid $100 million plus for his golf outings. Every time he goes out to golf, it costs us taxpayers. So as Robert Reich says, when he says he doesn't think about Americans' financial situations, well, we can straight up believe him. And he had a chance to walk it back on Fox, and he chose not to. So this is the grift that we're looking at. This is the grifter in chief that we're looking at. And, we have a chance right now to go to the polls, elect folks that will be on our ballot in November. We got a chance to choose during these primary elections folks that will be on our ballot in November that we know will serve our best interests, our financial interests as working Americans. We've got to remember that. We've got to live up to it. So in addition, let's look at, again, I've given you quite a few sources for all of this. And one of my favorite sources, OAF Nation, also is reporting on the fact that $1 billion is what this White House and the Senate are looking for from taxpayers. And again, Senate Republicans are seeking $1 billion in taxpayer money for Diaper Dan's White House ballroom project. I say, since it's, courts have said that he had to cease and stop the construction of it, that they make him out of his own pocket pay for reconstructing that East Wing to exactly the way it was before they tore it down. That's what I say. That's what will teach this grifter in chief that he better stop grifting off of our taxpayer dollars. All right, y'all. Again, what does this mean to Hardin County? Well, it means to Hardin County, we know that we are being told our kids can't have free breakfast and free lunch next year in Hardin County schools and in Jefferson County schools and all the schools across this state. That they're cutting that. They're cutting aid to the poor and the working class. But they've got what? $1 billion to spend on this frickin' ballroom that none of us will ever get to, I'm not going to be able to prance and dance there. Are you? So that's what's at stake. Let's don't forget it. Let's remember, y'all, we are all in this together. So united we must stand in order to not fall. That's Kentucky's motto. United we stand, divided we fall. I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper. I love my neighbors as I love myself. So, as I start off the new week, I'm going to make sure, hey, if you need a ride to vote on Tuesday, you can call me. 606-253-9885. I'll give you a ride. If that's what's holding you up, keeping you from voting in the primaries, give me a call. I'll come get you. I'll give you a ride if you're here in Hardin County. All right. Hope you have a great week. Remember, everyone deployed. Bless your corazon and have an amazing week. Keep your powder dry and stay frosty, Hardin.
Because even the bank foreclosed on farms across